Here's JB Buno.
Nearly a year and a half after the murder of Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie's mother breaking her silence, explaining why a private letter to her son that allegedly contains references to a shovel burying a body should remain private. We're live with the latest new court documents plus a live interview. Starts now on WFLA Now. Hello there to you folks. Good afternoon, nearly good evening here with you on the East Coast. JB here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. We're going to get to our live interview here in just a moment. But first, if you want to read more on this story, my report filed last night on WFLA.com, Brian Laundrie's mother breaking her silence for the very first time. Joining me live on stream, Pat Riley, the attorney for Joe Petito, for Nicole Schmidt. We put out interview requests to all attorneys attached to this story and these latest developments. Pat was the one who agreed to do an interview with us on WFLA Now today. Stephen Bertolino declined our interview request as well as comment. Same with Matthew Luca, the Florida attorney representing the Laundries. Pat Riley, let's get right into this here. You're one of the few people who have seen this letter. You saw this letter. You told me that you saw this letter when you were at the FBI, I believe in June of last year. The FBI was returning evidence that they had collected over the course of the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie investigation. And one of the pieces of evidence that they were returning to the respective families was this letter, a letter that you read. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, JB.
And what can you break down the contents of that letter, Pat?
Well, it's difficult to do. I haven't seen it since June of last year, and I don't frankly remember if I read the entire letter or not. There were certain portions of it that stuck out. So I'm not comfortable discussing the letter in its entirety. I just know that there were certain portions of it, including the offer to help bury a body, that stand out in this.
So I'm going to make sure that I have this correct from my notes because we've had a lot of conversations, you and I, as I've been trying to, of course, do as much accurate reporting on this story as I possibly can. You had mentioned that there was, to me, that when you read the letter, again, back in June of last year, that there was a reference to a shovel, to burying a body, and even, I believe that you mentioned in a News Nation interview, something to the effect of helping get Brian out of prison. We now have this letter right here from Roberta Laundrie, where she writes about 8 paragraphs or so explaining why she wrote this letter. I'm going to skip ahead because I know that a lot of our audience has already seen this on our website. So I'm going to skip ahead, and I just want to read for you the final paragraph, her conclusion, her final statement on this. And it reads as follows. I repeat, the letter that I wrote to Brian before he left with Gabby for their fateful trip was nothing more than a private communication between myself and my son, and I never expected anyone else would read it. In some way, I did not want anyone else to read it, as I know it is not the type of letter a mother writes to her adult son, and I did not want to embarrass Brian. That is why I wrote burn after reading on the envelope, and I knew that Brian would know what that meant. I am now appreciative that he actually kept it. And then it's signed here by Roberta Laundrie. When you read these words, Pat, these are the words of a mother who lost her son to suicide, lost her future daughter-in-law to murder. Of course, this tragic situation that we have been reporting on for a year and a half. What do you make of this letter?
Well, when you look at the things that you just read, where she said that this is not the type of a letter a mother writes to her adult son, well, that's absolutely correct. Who writes a letter to their adult son saying they'll help bury a body and say some of the other things? And it's no surprise she didn't want anyone else to see it. But now she wants to provide an explanation for the letter and have us accept her word as to what was actually in the letter and what its intent was, but she doesn't want to provide the letter.
And I'm kind of working backwards here because Pat does not have, of course, all day to speak with us on stream, and we're going to be going more in depth into each paragraph here when Pat is off the call in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. But as far, again, as a reminder, this is a letter that Roberta wrote to Brian that said burn after reading on the envelope. And in this letter that we now have, a letter to the court, it's written here some of the reasoning behind the letter itself. She makes references to some children's books, including The Runaway Bunny and Little Bear, and then she also makes reference to a book by the title of Burn After Writing. What do you? This is very fresh to you. You and I were just talking off stream a moment ago that you're just processing this from a legal standpoint, as we're processing this from, of course, from a reporting standpoint. But what do you make of some of the explanations and some of the reasoning behind what she wrote in this letter that we still have not seen?
Well, I've not read the Runaway Bunny or the Little Bear, although after reading this, I did take the time to look it up, and there was a YouTube video of someone reading it, and I'll tell you, I didn't see anything in there about helping to bury a body. And I find it difficult to believe that she's alluding to children's books as though when she was writing this letter to Brian, she was thinking of children's books or she had read a child's book with him. It's a very self-serving document intended to draw attention away from what it really says. And I think that this needs to get before a jury and let a jury decide when it was written and what its intent was.
As I noted, we're kind of working backwards here. This letter has been filed in Sarasota County Circuit Court for those who have not read the story yet and are watching this for the first time. And it was attached to a motion for a protective order. Matthew Luca has filed this on behalf of his clients, Chris and Roberta Laundrie. They very clearly, Pat, do not want this letter to be made public. They don't want this letter to be part of the discovery process, something that you filed in Sarasota County Court with the judge there in Sarasota County Circuit Court, now Judge Danielle Brewer. You did that back in December. What do you make of the motion for a protective order to prevent this from ever seeing the light of day?
Well, it's unusual to have a motion for a protective order want you to see it, while on the other hand, the affidavit that's attached to it tells us what portions of the letter they want us to know about, and doesn't really address the other portions of it, other than to say that I believe that the phrases that were used in the letter are not found in the book she shared with Brian as a child. However, they're common enough in our circle of friends and family to describe who you could turn to in the most troubling times of your life. I know over time I've said to my children, I would do anything for you. I don't think I've ever said I'd help bury a body, and I don't think I'd ever said I'd help them to cover up a crime.
Very interesting, the fact that we are hearing from Roberta Laundrie for the first time through these words, and while we do not know who authored each and every individual sentence, this is a personal note where she also goes into detail, Pat, about how for the first time we're learning. I'm going to read it here on the second page. The purpose of this letter was to reach out to Brian while he and I were experiencing a difficult period in our relationship. Brian and I had always had a very open and communicative relationship, and in the months prior to the trip, our relationship had become strained. And then she goes into how she revisited some of these stories to, quote unquote, describe the depth of a mother's love. What's your anticipation if it is Judge Danielle Brewer? I believe that she is the judge presiding over the lawsuit going forward. What's your anticipation? Let me ask you this first. Do you still intend to get this letter admitted as evidence in this case? Do you plan to proceed?
Absolutely.
And what do you expect Judge Brewer will decide?
Well, when this letter was discussed at the last hearing that we had, I made the same arguments to Judge Brewer that I'm going to make when we're back in court again, and that is that this letter is relevant because it shows if it was written after Gabby was murdered, it shows that Roberta Laundrie and Christopher Laundrie were aware of the murder and were helping to take steps to cover that murder up. I don't know when that letter was written. It's not dated. And I'm not going to take Roberta Laundrie's word for when it was done. She's just choosing to speak out at this moment. And so I think she ought to be cross-examined about it. I think she ought to have to testify to a jury, let a jury decide if she's telling the truth, if she's credible, and then decide what the intent of the letter was.
The big thing with this letter, as you just noted, is that you've held it in your hand, you've read it. I've also been communicating with Stephen Bertolino, the New York attorney for for Chris and Roberta Laundrie, and as well as Brian Laundrie before, of course, he died. And they have told me that there is no date on this letter. They have also repeatedly communicated to me that this has nothing to do with Gabby Petito. As far as the actual date and when this letter was written, I'm going to read it here from paragraph 4. Roberta says, "I wrote the letter to my son, Brian Laundrie, on or about the end of May 2021. Although I do not know the exact date I wrote the letter, I do know that I wrote it and gave it to Brian before Brian and Gabby left for New York, which was on June 2nd of 2021. The date, Pat, of course, is going to be so key. But do you know if the letter itself, again, you having read it, does it mention Gabby Petito by name at all?
JB, I just got to look at it briefly back in June. I don't recall, except for the suggestion about helping to bury a body, I don't remember if Gabby's name is mentioned in that document or not. I'll tell you this, what's interesting is I got a brief moment to look at it in the FBI chambers, and Attorney Bertolino said, well, of course, you're going to get this through discovery, so you'll get to read it then. And here we are fighting for something he told me he was going to provide.
So according to you and according to that conversation, Bertolino had an expectation that this was going to become public at some point. You are trying to get it through the discovery process. We have, in the media, of course, submitted FOIA requests for the federal government to release it now that the FBI's investigation is closed. How confident are you that we're going to see this letter? And in your opinion, do you think it is going to shine new light on a story that for so many people, some have moved on, some haven't?
I'm confident we're going to get the letter, whether it's through the FOIA request or whether it's through discovery. I think we're definitely going to get it.
What's next or actually, before I even ask about what's next, have you talked to Joe Petito? Have you talked to Nicole Schmidt? What is their response to hearing from Roberta for the first time? I remember going back, how frustrated they were that they could not get a hold of Roberta and Chris Laundrie, Brian Laundrie's parents. And now this is really the first time that we're hearing from Roberta publicly. What has been their response if you've chatted with them?
Yeah, I can tell you that Nicole is extremely upset. She is offended that Roberta Laundrie would utilize Gabby in defending herself with regard to that particular letter, but chose to keep quiet when they were looking for Gabby.
And your expectation as far as Judge Brewer's decision, as far as what's next, a hearing is going to be scheduled, as I understand it, right, where this letter and whether or not it becomes public is really going to take center stage, if you will. What's your expectation? I mean, the Laundries are maintaining that this is personal, this is private, and has nothing to do with Gabby Petito, and therefore it should not be part of this lawsuit. You, of course, are maintaining the exact opposite, that it does pertain to Gabby Petito, it does pertain to her murder, and it does pertain to the Laundries' conduct. What is your expectations for when this hearing might be, and also what are your expectations for what might happen?
Well, if I had written this letter, I'd be doing the exact same thing and saying this has nothing to do with Gabby's murder. This was written months before, but curiously, the letter is undated. I don't expect that we're going to get this before the court until sometime in May or June. It's just difficult to get scheduling time with the court, and then when you add to it that there's 3 attorneys involved, it's difficult to coordinate everyone's schedule.
And while I have you,
not to suggest, by the way, that other counsel haven't been cooperating and getting things scheduled. They absolutely have.
While I have you, let's just change gears here for a minute. There's another hearing that has been scheduled for May. Laundrie, longtime family attorney for the Laundrie, Stephen Bertolino, has filed a motion to dismiss the amended complaint, to dismiss Judge Brewer's ruling that he is to be added as a co-defendant on the lawsuit. Your comment on his motion to get that thrown out?
Sure. The arguments that are raised both in their motion to dismiss the complaint and the one that was raised by Attorney Luca on behalf of the Laundries is just a rehash of the issues that the court's already decided. So the rulings by Judge Carroll are the law of the case, and they don't get a chance to revisit those issues at this time.
Pat Riley, before we let you go here on Zoom, Any other final thoughts? Any other updates on this case, and also too your expectation for the docket has it right now as a court case that is expected in August of 2023, but with all of these pretrial motions still to be heard, your expectation for when this actually does go to a jury trial, if it does make it in fact to a jury trial.
I don't know the answer to that. I know it's not going to go in June. We have a conference scheduled with the judge sometime this month to set new deadlines. So at this point, I don't have any expectation of when it's going to occur.
Pat Riley joining us here live on WFLA Now. Pat, thanks a whole lot for joining us, for your time, and we'll of course be, I'm sure, be chatting in the future as further developments occur in this case. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, JB.
All right, Pat Riley here joining us, everybody, live on stream. Grateful for Pat taking some time out of his day to speak on behalf of his clients. As a reminder, as we do when we cover stories, we are always striving to be fair and balanced. At the same time today, I reached out to Stephen Bertolino. I reached out to Matthew Luca. I asked them for an interview or comment. They declined both. So we will not be hearing on this particular live stream from Stephen Bertolino, who again has been added as a co-defendant in this case. We will not be hearing from Matthew Luca, who's the Florida attorney that has been hired to represent Chris and Roberta Laundrie. But this is also getting a response from the other side. So as far as seeking, being able to share this latest update from both sides, we have Roberta speaking on behalf of one side, and then of course we have this latest comment from Pat Riley speaking on behalf of his clients, Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt. Those are the, of course, parents of Gabby Petito. Back here in 30 seconds on WFLA Now, we're going to be getting to your hashtag HeyJB, hashtag, well, no, it's just your hashtag HeyJB questions and comments. Stand by. And back here with you on live stream, everybody, as we now pivot to a new section of our live stream. JB here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center, as we were just live on broadcast television, live as well as across all platforms, and we remain on all platforms on WFLA Now. We're live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. We are live on TikTok. We're saying hello to all those audiences. We're also going to be taking some questions, of course, on Twitter as well. It's really important to let you know that we're always paying attention to your comments across multiple different comment sections online, your platform of choice, if you will. And so this is a story that a lot of folks have been reading into or reading about the last 24, not even 24 hours. We posted it around 9, 10 o'clock last night. And so there's still a lot of folks reacting to this. But I want to take an opportunity while we're here live on stream to kind of go through this a little bit more, at a little bit more of a granular level. And then I want to read Roberta. If you've been with us on live streams before, we have asked perhaps 100, maybe 1,000 times as to when the Laundries are going to speak, when we are going to hear from Chris Laundrie, when are we going to hear from Roberta Laundrie? It has been asked so many times over and over again by not just myself, not just reporters at WFLA, but people around the world. When are we going to hear another side of the story, and the story coming from Brian Laundrie's parents? Well, this is the first time that we are actually hearing from that side, and we're hearing from Roberta and getting a little bit more insight as to what was going on at the time and the summer of 2021, and what her relationship with Brian Laundrie was really like, what her relationship was like with her 22-year-old engaged son, or excuse me, 23-year-old engaged son. Gabby Petito, of course, was 22 years old. So this provides us with a bit of information that up to this point was unknown. We had no idea as to what was going on with Roberta Laundrie. And while she claims that this was written on or before May of 2021, before Gabby and Brian had left for New York, and then before they had left for their cross-country trip across the country, Um, we have the other side here. We have Pat Riley, who believes, and Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, who believe that this letter is more sinister than what this most current letter would lead some to believe. So we have a difference of opinions here, and this difference of opinions is going to come to a clashing point right there in that courtroom in the next couple of months, whenever we have the hearing scheduled for whether or not Roberta Laundrie's letter is going to be ruled as admissible as evidence as far as the looming civil trial between these two families. So I want to read this here. I want to make sure that I'm also communicating with our team. I have this. Stand by 1 second. Okay. Terrific. And now what we're going to do, folks, is we are going to read through the entirety of Roberta Laundrie's words. And then what we're going to do is take your hashtag HeyJB questions and comments. So everybody, you can type them in the comment section right now. I don't have any in the queue just yet. But what I want you to do is to type your comment into the comment section and then get ready to hit enter on it. Because right as soon as I'm done reading this, what we're going to do is take some of your hashtag HeyJB questions and comments on stream. All right, it starts as follows. This is again in support of the motion for a protective order against the release of the letter written by Roberta Laundrie to her son, Brian Laundrie, that was collected as FBI evidence. This is a letter about the letter. Hopefully everyone's following along here. And it reads as follows. I, Roberta Laundrie, am a defendant in the above-styled cause, and I do hereby swear or affirm that I fully understand the meaning of all the terms of this affidavit. I wrote the letter requested by the plaintiff's second request for production. I wrote the letter to my son, Brian Laundrie, on or about the end of May 2021. Although I do not know the exact date I wrote the letter, I do know that I wrote it and gave it to Brian before Brian and Gabby left Florida for New York, which was on June 2nd of 2021. Brian and Gabby went from Florida to New York before they went out west. The purpose of the letter was to reach out to Brian while he and I were experiencing a difficult period in our relationship. Brian and I had always had a very open and communicative relationship, and in the months prior to the trip, our relationship had become strained. Brian and I shared a love of stories, and some of the language in the letter was using similar phrases to describe the depth of a mother's love. The two books that come to mind are The Runaway Bunny and Little Bear. In addition, Gabby had given Brian a book called Burn After Writing, which contains printed questions to which the reader responds by writing their answers on the page. The back of the book instructs the reader to create a secret book and then destroy by burn after writing. The bottom of the back cover says, write, burn, repeat. Brian, Gabby, and I often joked about this book and the importance of being able to express yourself. If you were embarrassed or simply did not want anyone to know your thoughts or feelings, then the book offered the perfect solution by telling you to burn it. This is where my message to Brian came from, and I wrote on the cover of the letter for Brian to burn after reading. In short, I was trying to connect with Brian and repair our relationship as he was planning to leave home, and I had hoped this letter would remind him how much I loved him. There were some other phrases that I used in the letter which are not found in the books I shared with Brian as a child. However, these phrases were common enough in our circle of friends and family to describe who you could turn to in the most troubling times of your life. While I used words that seemed to have a connection with Brian's actions and his taking of Gabby's life, I never would have fathomed the events that unfolded months later between Brian and Gabby would reflect the words in my letter. The words in the letter could never have been a comment on that tragic situation, as they were written so many months before. My words to Brian were meant to convey my love and support for my son through a lighthearted and quirky reminder that my love for him was not diminished and could not be shaken by the miles of separation we would soon be faced with. Although a few of the words in the letter are being quoted by others as having a connection to this case, all of the words taken together and in the context of the reason the letter was written show that there is no connection. In addition, there has been some speculation that this letter was in Brian's possession or in his backpack when he died, insinuating that I gave it to him as he left my home on September 13th, 2021. But that is not true because the FBI had the letter in their possession and questioned members of my family about it prior to October 20th, 2021, when my husband and I found Brian's remains in the reserve. I repeat that the letter I wrote to Brian before he left with Gabby for their fateful trip was nothing more than a private communication between myself and my son, and I never expected anyone else would read it. In some way, I did not want anyone else to read it, as I know it is not the type of letter a mother writes to her adult son, and I did not want to embarrass Brian. That is why I wrote "burn after reading" on the envelope. And I knew that Brian would know what that meant. I am now appreciative that he actually kept it. Signed, Roberta Laundrie, State of Florida, County, Sarasota. Hopefully everybody can see that. The signature there from Roberta stating that the words are, in fact, hers. I want to share one thing as I read through this, and I'm just processing this as I read it. This is the first time I've read it aloud in its entirety. And there's one thing that I want to point out that I think is particularly interesting. And it comes from paragraph 7. I think it's important to note that a lot of this will be determined in a court of law as to whether or not this version of events and the explanation here, whether or not this is true, partially true, or completely false. But the one thing that really sticks out to me that is more likely to be fact than fiction is this line here. In addition, there has been some speculation that this letter was in Brian's possession or in his backpack when he died, insinuating that I gave it to him as he left my home on September 13th, 2021. But that is not true because the FBI had the letter in their possession and questioned members of my family about it prior to October 20th, 2021, when my husband and I found Brian's remains in the reserve. Reason this is particularly noteworthy is because should this go to a jury trial, again, in civil court in Sarasota, as we expect at some point this year, it is very likely that the FBI will be part of the civil lawsuit as far as agents being called to the stand to provide testimony. That is very much a potential piece on the table. And for Roberta Laundrie to specifically state that the FBI had the letter in their possession and questioned members of my family about it prior to October 20th, when my husband and I found Brian's remains in the reserve, is pointing out that they're bringing in a third party into the equation in this paragraph. It's not just the people in the story as we know them, as far as Roberta Laundrie, Chris Laundrie, Gabby Petito, and Brian Laundrie, but they're bringing in the FBI for the first time in this letter, as far as Roberta's writing. So the FBI would absolutely be asked, should this be granted into evidence? The FBI is going to be asked if this line is in fact true, and it would call into question the validity of the entire 8 paragraphs here. And so if Roberta Laundrie were to be caught lying about this one particular instance, one particular line, it calls into question the credibility of the entire explanation for why this letter was written. So that, to me, from an outsider's perspective and knowing a lot about this story, that is a line that I circle mentally, because it would not have been included if they were not highly certain that they could point to this moment in time where the FBI questioned members of the Laundrie family before October 20th, 2021, when Brian's remains were found in the Carlton Reserve. Okay, that's the one point that I wanted to make. Let's get to your comments, your questions, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitter, and TikTok Live as well. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. If you use hashtag HeyJB with your comment, we can animate it on screen. If you don't want your comment on screen with your name and your picture and all that, just don't use the hashtag. Let's go to Dearbla McGardle, hashtag KJB. If the letter is so easily explained, what took her so long to come clean about it? And why does she still omit elements of it from the public eye? So through their attorneys, Roberta Laundrie has indicated that she does not want this to be public because it is a personal letter between mother and son and does not pertain to Gabby Petito. As far as why the letter, this particular letter, is coming nearly 18 months after Gabby Petito's death. The reason, of course, is our court system and the fact that this has now, as of December of really just a few months, 3 months ago, really 90 days ago, really around this time, that is when this letter became known to the public, that we first learned about it. And now that the Petito, now that Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, through their attorney Pat Riley, is pressing for this letter and are filing to have this letter be included in the discovery process, this is the response from Roberta saying, no, this should not be, admitted as evidence in a civil trial. This doesn't pertain to Gabby Petito's death, and this does not. This was not written in August or September of 2021. It was written on or about the end of May 2021. So that is why the letter is being this. That's why we're hearing from Roberta for the first time, is because she is ardently defending against the release of this private correspondence, as she would put it, this private letter. And she's doing so through our legal system. And our legal system, of course, makes a lot of records public. And this was a public record that we got last night for the first time. And we're learning about it now. And listening to some of the conversation surrounding it. Let's go to some of the other comments. Sarah Chapman, hashtag KJB. Could Roberta be saying that the letter was written before the trip because Gabby's murder was actually planned prior to the trip? I know that there's going to be, and there have been, and we have on this live stream on WFLA Now, we have confronted the conspiracy theories. I mean, we have openly and honestly, talked about them here on this live stream and told you what's fact, what's fiction, and what's that gray area between fact and fiction. But to suggest that there is no evidence whatsoever that Gabby's murder was that premeditated. There's no evidence that at this time that Chris and Roberta Laundrie were involved in the actual murder of Gabby Petito in any way. And to suggest otherwise is just is doing so purely from a conspiracy theory standpoint. That would just be somebody online who is making a completely a claim that is completely lacking fact whatsoever. It has to be said that while it might be very easy for the public to pile on to Chris and Roberta Laundrie, it is my responsibility as a journalist to remind you they have not been charged with any crimes, ever, as far as this case. Chris and Roberta Laundrie have never been charged with a crime connected to Gabby Petito or connected to their son's death in the Carlton Reserve. They were involved and communicating with law enforcement in September of 2021. They did go out to the Carlton Reserve that day and found, of course, what would later be revealed as Brian Laundrie's remains. But they have never been charged with a crime. And this also has to be stated and is really important for us to remember. The letter that we're talking about that was encased in this burn after reading envelope. This letter that allegedly contains references to a shovel, to a body, and to potentially breaking Brian out of prison to some extent. This was in the possession of the FBI. The FBI had it for months as they were conducting an extremely thorough investigation into all parties involved in the murder of Gabby Petito and then, as we would learn later, the suicide of Brian Laundrie. If the letter in and of itself was incriminating, the FBI is going to proceed with charges against Chris and Roberta Laundrie. They had this for months, not releasing it until June of 2022, and they never charged Chris and Roberta Laundrie. So that's really important to remember. Now, the letter might still apply to the civil lawsuit, according to Pat Riley, the lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, as they attempt to paint a picture that the Laundries were callous and had little regard for Nicole Schmidt and Joe Petito as they were desperately searching for their daughter. But it did not rise to the level. The letter itself did not rise to the level, the criteria necessary for the FBI to proceed with charges. And that's why if the FBI is to actually testify in this court case, if they are actually going to have an agent represent the Bureau and they are going to speak, it is going to be highly fascinating because we're going to get a little bit more from the FBI as to what was going on as they were conducting this investigation into Brian Laundrie's disappearance and Gabby Petito's death. Going into some other comments. Earth, Moon, Stars, #AJB. I don't think the letter is nefarious as people think it is. You know, we might do a poll here in a little bit as to whether or not people believe Roberta Laundrie. That is something that we can do. That is something that is on the table as to whether or not people believe the words of Roberta Laundrie. People want to say that the letter is coming out 18 months later or so, or nearly 18 months later, you can't believe Roberta. That's your opinion. If you can't believe Roberta, that's everyone has a right to their own opinion when they, of course, consume news like they do now in the year 2023. But as a reminder, Roberta Laundrie has only remained silent, which is a constitutional right in this country. We all are given the right to remain silent. Of course, they did speak through their attorney, Stephen Bertolino, and issued the statement, and that's how we find ourselves in this civil lawsuit. But as a reminder, this is the very first time that we're hearing from Roberta Laundrie. And so everyone can have their opinion, but as to whether or not, look, there's some people are going to hear these words and believe everything that Roberta Laundrie says. Some people are going to hear these words or read these words, this explanation from Roberta, and not believe a single word of it. And then there's going to be probably a majority of people that are going to believe some of this and not all of it, or they believe that certain things are omitted or certain things are highlighted. Everyone's going to have a different reaction to this. But it's really important to remember that this is the first time that we're hearing from this person. And as far as you can't just take this and just throw it out and say that it's all completely false. I mean, you can, but of course here, as far as the work that I'm doing to report on this story on a regular basis, relatively routine basis when we get developments, of course, this has to be considered as just the mother of the murderer in this case speaking out for the first time and offering a little bit of insight into what her relationship was like with her son and why she believes that a letter that she wrote to her son should remain private rather than, of course, be public. And when we say public, every word of the letter, should it actually be released, is going to be put under the microscope, evaluated. Every network in the country is going to be talking about it. It's not like a smaller, lesser-known court case. It is a court case that is still attracting significant, even though not as much, significant attention. I asked this, Linda, to Jennifer Koffendorfer, hashtag HJB. What Linda is asking, if it comes out in the civil case that there was criminal intent on the Laundries for covering up Gabby's death, could that be referred as a criminal charge of some sort? The FBI always has the power, provided the statute of limitations hasn't run out. The FBI always has the power to reopen investigations if new evidence is to come to light. If something is exposed that otherwise was not exposed, something that comes out years down the line, of course, the FBI can reopen the investigation. I think the investigation can be reopened at different levels. But as far as whether or not, again, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had this letter for a long time and decided that it was not incriminating. They determined that criminal charges weren't warranted given the nature of this letter. And it's not the only evidence that the FBI collected. The FBI collected a lot of evidence over the course of the investigation. And when they pooled it all together, there was nothing that led them to file charges. And that speaks very loudly. And it should be, even though, again, that the public perception of the Laundries is so negative still to this day, it has to be stated that they have never been charged with a crime in relation to Gabby Petito's death and their son's suicide. Scooter says, hashtag KJB, the Laundries are protected by Florida law. They can protect their son. Yeah, and not only can they protect their son, they can protect the memory of their son too. And they, without question, every documentary, every streaming service from Netflix to Hulu to HBO, every network in this country has attempted to reach out to them for an interview. And to this point, they have absolutely, they've declined every single solitary one. They are not speaking. And only they know why, but perhaps the reason why is because they're not only considering, perhaps it's because they're not only considering their own future, but they're also considering the memory of their son. Only they know. Only they know. So, okay, I'm glad that LV brought this up. Have you read the supposed book? Great to see you on your live. Well, thank you, LV. But again, you know, I talked a little bit about this on TikTok earlier today, as well as on Instagram. You can follow me at WFLAJB on Instagram and TikTok. And I went a little bit more into the books. But let's go into the books for a second, because this is perhaps the most peculiar part of this letter. And again, everything that Roberta writes here in her own words, she is doing so with intent. She is telling us a story, and she is giving us a bit of a view into what her relationship was like with her son, and she chooses to include these lines here about these books. Brian and I shared a love of stories, and some of the language in the letter was similar phrases to describe the depth of a mother's love. The two books that come to mind are Runaway Bunny and Little Bear. In addition, Gabby had given Brian a book called Burn After Writing, which contains printed questions to which the reader responds by writing their answers on the page. So 3 books here: Runaway Bunny, Little Bear, and Burn After Writing. I have not read any of the 3 books. The first 2 books, as I understand it, are children's books. I'm sure that the authors of these books never thought that they would be used in this way or discussed in this way in connection to, you know, a civil lawsuit pertaining to a murder and a suicide of a young couple. I can't imagine that Runaway Bunny and Little Bear would ever be tied to the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie story, but here we are. Here we find ourselves. But then Burn After Writing. What genre is that book? Let's see here. According to the Amazon listing, Burn After Writing. The description: write, burn, repeat, collect, and share them all. As far as there's all these different covers that you can It was written by a woman by the name of Sharon Jones. I'm the author of the original Burn After Writing, a self-discovery book that encourages you, the reader, to ask yourself where you've come from, where you are now, and ultimately just where you are going. That's from the author. Again, according to Amazon. So the book, yes, Write, Burn, Repeat. It's definitely the same book without question. And Roberta says, Brian, Gabby, and I often joked about the book and the importance of being able to express yourself. If you were embarrassed or simply did not know, or excuse me, simply did not want anyone to know your thoughts or feelings, then the book offered the perfect solution by telling you to burn it. So this book, Burn After Writing, has, according to Roberta Laundrie, a special connection between her, Gabby, and Brian, and that was the reason for the burn after reading words that were written on the envelope. It's up to everybody whether or not you believe that. And maybe, again, we have the power here to do polls, and maybe we will. But she is saying that the reason that she wrote burn after reading on the letter, on the envelope, was because of an inside joke that Roberta, Brian, and Gabby had about the book Burn After Writing. Not Burn After Reading, but Burn After Writing is the name of the book. In short, words from Roberta. In short, I was trying to connect with Brian and repair our relationship as he was planning to leave home, and I had hoped this letter would remind him how much I loved him. So these books have a special place in Roberta's heart, according to what we're reading here. And she is trying to establish that, and that this isn't me leaning one way or another, but this is pretty evident and pretty obvious. She has noted several times through her attorney, and she's noted here that this is a personal letter between, mother and son. She is trying to illustrate why it's personal and why she doesn't want it released. But again, the big overarching thing that we have to remember here when it comes to this burn after reading letter is that it does not have a date, and when it was written is extremely important. And whether or not they can ever determine as to whether or not it was written in May or in August or September, I think a lot of answers, a lot of questions would answer themselves here with a lot of stuff that we're talking about. We're almost playing defense without knowing what the offense looks like here, because we're talking about a defensive piece of court documentation here. They are seeking to prevent something. They are seeking to prevent the release of this letter. And we don't even know what's in the letter other than what Pat Riley, he admittedly was, he said something to the effect of, JB, I really don't remember what was, in the letter all that great because, look, it was 9 months ago, 9 months ago, 9.5 months ago, if you will, when he read it for a quick moment at the FBI field office in Tampa. So, other questions and comments? I'm going to go to Twitter here in just a second. You can use hashtag KJB on Twitter. I'm also going to go over to TikTok Live here in just a moment. Going nowhere, hashtag KJB. If anything, the Laundrie say in civil court conflicts with any statement they gave to the FBI. Do the FBI reopen the investigation into Gabby's death? This is a fascinating question from Going Nowhere. And as I understand it from speaking to experts, okay, it's at the FBI's discretion whether or not they want to reopen an investigation. And look, if there was something that the Laundries were to say, if there was something that the Laundries were to say in civil court that conflicted with what was said during a criminal investigation, that I think without a doubt is going to get the attention of the FBI. But whether they choose to act on it is really up to the FBI, and I suppose we shall see. Interesting from a Alicia hashtag KJB. Do they have that burn after writing book? Because with the responses / answers made in the workbook might be telling. Right. So this is a book, burn after writing, where you write responses in the book, and you're encouraged to then dispose of those messages that you, in essence, write to yourself. It's part of the mission of the book is to write stuff. And then what was the tagline on it? Write, burn, repeat. So you're supposed to be doing away with certain things. Is there a burn after writing book? Is there a tangible book that was in the possession of either Brian or Gabby or Roberta or anyone else connected to the story? Was there we don't know. That's a great question. But we don't know. But it was the subject of an inside joke, according to Roberta Laundrie, between her, Gabby, and Brian. Let's not forget they lived together for roughly a year. Imagine for a second you're Gabby Petito and you're living with your future in-laws at that home in Northport, the home that we've seen a million times, as I drop my pen, the home that we've seen a million times. She lived there with Roberta. So this was said to be a joke between the three of them during this time. That's according to Roberta Laundrie. Let's go over to Twitter. Say hi to people on Twitter. I'm just going to look up hashtag KJB on Twitter, see what folks are saying. Megan, we went over this. Megan says, I have a question. If Roberta wrote the letter before the trip, as she claims, doesn't that mean that she knew that he was going to commit the crime? We don't know what's in this letter. We don't know how specific it is. We don't know how vague it is. And also, too, we don't know if it even mentions Gabby Petito by name. A reminder, the FBI had this letter and they could not file charges based on the letter against Chris and / or Roberta Laundrie. So, all of these questions about premeditation, any questions about there being premeditated murder of Gabby Petito that extends months backwards into 2021, and that Chris and Roberta Laundrie were involved is just nothing more than a conspiracy theory that is completely baseless. Completely baseless. There's no evidence whatsoever to support that claim. And I have to, as a reporter, I have to remind you of that. It's really important. Marcy says, hashtag KJB on Twitter, I don't care what the context. No one tells somebody to burn something after reading it unless it's incriminating. Lauren says, hashtag KJB funny. She speaks out now to save herself, but refused to speak out to save Gabby Petito. I think that is likely the reason why Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt feel the way that they do. It's taking so much. It has all they've wanted from the very beginning is help finding their daughter. And they desperately tried to get just a response. Any kind of a response from Chris and Roberta Laundrie, and those attempts between, the two future families that are supposed to be in-laws, those attempts are unsuccessful. So there's been tremendous, tremendous frustration on behalf of Joe Petito. I know because I've talked to Joe. I know because I've talked to Nicole. Unbelievable amounts of frustration for more than a year now that they have not been able to break through to who was supposed to be their future in-laws, supposed to have many happy memories together, a happy future together, as this young couple was engaged to spend the rest of their life together. And the fact that we're now just hearing about this for the first time, that has really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I can only imagine how Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt feel. Back to Twitter. Chris, no. And more questions about whether or not Chris and Roberta Laundrie are suspects of any kind or being investigated. The answer to that is unequivocally no. They are defendants in a civil lawsuit And I don't want anything in my reporting to get misconstrued. I'm trying to be as clear as day here and telling you that they are not being there's no open investigation that we've been made aware of, or there's no current attempt to charge them. They are defendants in a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is being handled in civil court. Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, Gabby Petito's parents, filing the lawsuit against Brian Laundrie's parents, Chris and Roberta, and then adding their attorney, Stephen Bertolino, as a co-defendant in that lawsuit, which Judge Brewer signed off on. All right, let's go over to TikTok. Let's say hi to TikTok on the WFLA JB TikTok page. I see folks joining us over there like Christy and Brenda and Carol, and so many others. If you guys, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity here. Oh, Brittany says, #HJB, joke or not, it's not a joking matter. She frustrates me. It's interesting. Again, being fair and objective here. If Roberta Laundrie did write this letter in May, and if it did have nothing to do with Gabby Petito, then, there being a joking nature, a jovial nature to the letter itself, isn't all that bad. But the fact, again, the fact that we have Pat Riley saying, the attorney for Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, saying that it makes reference to a shovel and burying a body and getting Brian out of prison, that brings a much darker layer to this letter and makes it all the more confusing as to how it could be spun as just a joking letter regarding some children's books and some just, the actual book Burn After Writing. I'm really, does the letter, will the letter ever be released? We will find out. And does it say? How specific is it about claims that, again, the claims from Riley that it talks about burying a body and the use of a shovel? I think we can all say, and I think it's fair for me, even as a reporter, to say that if the letter does contain references to a shovel and to burying a body and to getting her son out of prison, that's not a normal thing between mother and son as far as being the subject matter of a letter. And Roberta admits as such. I want to find it here. Hold on. Here it is. I didn't see it because it crosses over from one page onto the next, from page 2 to 3. While I used words that seemed to have a connection with Brian's actions and his taking of Gabby's life, I never would have fathomed the events that unfolded months later between Brian and Gabby would reflect the words in my letter. So it's just, she is admitting that this letter is, I think a fair descriptor would be eyebrow raising. She's admitting that this letter, contextually is a bit unorthodox, because not only, and I think we've talked about this on stream before, not only is it weird for a mother to write to her son about a shovel and burying a body and getting her son out of prison, look, correct me if I'm wrong. I am asking my audience here to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a little bit strange for a mother to even write a letter to her son. I love my mother. I have a great relationship with my mom. She is, she's an angel. Love her to death. But I have never received a letter, or at least at least in the last 20 or so years, I haven't received a letter from my mother. I've received countless text messages of love, phone calls. I get Instagram messages, Facebook messages. My mom is multi-platform with her love as far as how she communicates her love for me, or being her firstborn son, and I love my mom. But I don't think she's ever written me a letter, because it's kind of, isn't that a bit, it's kind of a bit of old-fashioned now. And while I've received greeting cards, everyone has gotten, that Christmas card, or, that birthday card from their mom, and that's written correspondence. To actually get a letter in an envelope from your mom, that is very old school now. It's really traditional. So right then and there, that's eyebrow raising enough. But then when you add that this letter contains subject matter that is tied to a shovel, getting your son out of prison, and burying a body, well, then that's really, I think most people would agree. I think my comment section would agree, our comment sections here, people would agree that that is just a little bit bizarre, or maybe a lot of bit bizarre. So yeah, going back over to TikTok, saying hi to TikTok. Come back to YouTube and Facebook here in a second. Brittany says, #KJB on TikTok. They need to release it if it's not bad. Me as a mother wouldn't write something about a body. Yeah, I don't know too many moms out there that would write letters to their kids, whether it be a son or daughter or otherwise. I don't know too many moms that are writing letters to their kids about bodies and shovels and burying bodies and prison. Unless your child's in prison and maybe you have to write a letter. But I don't know. I don't know anyone. I don't know a single person. I don't know a single person in my life that writes letters anymore. That's just me. Just me. Everyone's communicating by text and by messages, DMs. Though I do miss postcards. You guys miss postcards? I miss postcards. Postcards are cool. You get them from internationally. That's pretty great. But as far as like a letter with a with a stamp on it and everything, like that USPS, the Postal Service. Shout out to the USPS and to the hardworking men and women of the Postal Service, but letters these days, most of the time I go into my mailbox, it's just filled with flyers and advertisements and magazines that I never signed up for. That's just the reality of the world we live in today. One more from TikTok. Christy wants to know, #KJB from TikTok, was there a date on the letter? No, the letter is not dated, and that is so important. Could the letter be analyzed? Could somebody look at the letter and evaluate the letter to figure out when it was written? The letter was already in the possession of the FBI and put through, I would imagine, every forensics test that they had available to them if they chose to do forensic tests on that letter. And you would imagine, given the scope of the FBI's investigation, they were doing as much as they could to investigate evidence such as the letter. And again, they could not put a date on it. Let's go over to Facebook and say hi to Facebook Live. Saying hi to everybody on Facebook. Hello. Good. Is it evening yet? I guess it's evening now. Afternoon into evening. Linda says, #KJB, why would she mail a letter to the son who lived with her? No, we don't, as we understand it, we don't believe the letter was ever mailed. It was given from mother to son. When it was given from mother to son is an enormous question. I will say this about Roberta. I will say this. I think that if you look at it from that moment in time, let's Let's look at Roberta's her version of events, and let's look at it for a second. If it is in fact, if this is all true, then perhaps she is giving. She basically points to this. She is giving a letter to her son before her her son leaves on a cross country road trip with his fiance. I will share this. I have heard from mothers. I have heard about this in stories and in my and just in general in life, that look, a mother seeing their child get married is a very happy thing, but it's also very much a transition. Parents out there that that have had children get married can speak to this far better than I can. But there's a transition that goes on there. For Roberta Laundrie, she is watching her son go on this cross country road trip with his fiance, and Brian, up until this point in his life, you could say, if it's true, that the most important woman in his life, the most important female in his life, is his mother. And now when you get engaged and you're quite literally hitting the road to spend all of this time, and you are leaving home to go on this cross-country road trip to spend it with somebody else, there's certainly a transition that comes into play for any mother when they watch their son get married. And while I can't speak to it, I don't have clearly I don't have that experience. Roberta is pointing to that in this letter, saying that she had a strained and difficult few months with Brian, and that she was trying to share something loving with him before he left on the road trip. So if you believe Roberta's version of events, she is trying to do something loving before she watches Brian leave for many, many months on this road trip with Gabby Petito, with, her son being 23 years old and already being engaged. Everyone can take that for what it is, but it is stated in here that Roberta was having a difficult time with Brian as far as their relationship becoming strained, and wanted to do something. Look, it says it right here. End of paragraph 5. I was trying to connect with Brian and repair our relationship as he was planning to leave home, and I had hoped this letter would remind him of how much I loved him. So, but that's if you believe that the letter was written in May before they left. Let's go over the timeline really quickly as I put away that comment. A lot more of Facebook and YouTube comments to get to here. We're going to be going till about 6 o'clock Eastern, so we got another 20 to 30 minutes, folks. Let's go over the timeline. Roberta says that she wrote the letter in May, the end of May. She says that Gabby and Brian left in the van on, they left Florida. Brian and Gabby left Florida to go to New York on June 2nd of 2021. They have their own road trip. Actually, it doesn't state whether or not, and I'm trying to remember from my memory if I have any confirmation how Brian and Gabby got from Florida to New York. This is all something that I'm going to have to review in my notes. Apologies. But again, end of May 2021, Roberta claims to have written this letter, the Burn After Reading letter. June 2nd, Brian and Gabby go from Florida to New York. July 2nd, they leave from New York in the van on their cross-country road trip. And then in August, Brian, of course, comes home, leaves Gabby on the road, flies back home to Northport, does some stuff at the storage unit, flies back, reunites with Gabby on the trip. And then, of course, there's the Moab incident, and, of course, Gabby's death soon thereafter, her murder soon thereafter. So that's Roberta's version of events, is that she wrote the burn after reading letter before Brian and Gabby had left Florida on June 2nd. Pat Riley and his clients, Gabby Petito's parents, believe that it's that the letter is far more nefarious than that, and points to the shovel and the burying of a body and breaking Brian or helping Brian get out of prison, and so we will find out. We will find out if Judge Danielle Brewer grants the request by Riley for the letter to be admitted as evidence. It'll be very curious to see how exactly Judge Brewer comes to her decision, but that will be a significant pretrial hearing, because it is perhaps the most significant piece of evidence in the lawsuit between these two families. All right, back to YouTube Live. This is Steffi's opinion. Hashtag HeyJB. I feel like the mother knew within hours he had killed her. That was his confidant. I think that from doing a lot of reading thousands, if not more than tens of thousands of comments in the many, many live streams that we've done on this story, I would say that a majority of people are of the opinion that at some point after Gabby Petito's murder, that Brian had informed someone, and it could have been multiple people. He had conversations with his attorney, Stephen Bertolino. He had conversations with his mom and his dad, as we understand it. Because of course he got back home, then they go on the Fort DeSoto camping trip. So all of these conversations after what had happened. But whether or not Brian Laundrie told his parents or told his attorney or told anyone that he had murdered Gabby Petito, that remains unknown. And while there are people out there that are thinking, JB, what? I mean, of course, he had to have told them. He had to have told somebody. He probably told everyone. All three of them, Chris and Roberta, his mom, his dad, and his attorney probably told all of them. We just don't know. Of course, if he's leaving the trip and he's making the long journey back from Wyoming all the way back home, there's all these different scenarios at play. He could have not told the entirety of the story, or he could have said that it was an accident, or he could have said, there's so many different scenarios that come into play. We don't know what Brian's parents know. We don't know what Chris and Roberta were told. We don't. And while people are so certain, because I know this because people comment about this all the time, still to this day, people are so certain that the Laundries were in the know, there's no evidence of that at this time. And that's why there's so much fascination around the trial when it does in fact happen, because people want to know once and for all, were Brian's parents aware of the murder? And did they voluntarily not talk to Nicole and Joe, Gabby's parents, when they were so desperate to find their daughter? Did they essentially block them and ignore them because they were protecting their son? I think people are widely hoping for closure on the story, and that is one of the final stones left unturned. We have Brian Laundrie's confession. You've seen it here on your screen. We know how Gabby died. We know how Brian died, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. We know so much about the story, but people still want to know whether or not there were individuals who, whether or not Brian's parents were protecting him. There are people that want to know the answer to that question. The neighborhood asking really the fundamental question, hashtag HJB, why would you write a letter like that before anything ever happened, makes zero sense. Roberta claims, back to the document, Roberta claims that it was because of some children's books, stories that she and Brian had loved together over the course of their mother-son relationship, and this joke that existed between Gabby, Brian, and Roberta about the burn after writing book. That is her story. And that's why people are on this live stream, because they are hearing from Roberta for the first time, and that is her version of events. Anti-hero's opinion. The Laundries have made it really hard to believe them. I would opine that the reason that people have such a difficult time believing the Laundries and believing these words from Roberta is because so much time has passed, and only now, as there's pressure, legal pressure, to provide context, only now are we receiving that context. Sean says, hashtag KJB, will the Petitos and Trimps be able to use that burn after reading letter against the Laundries in court during the trial later this year to prove the Laundries' malice against Gabby? Well, we don't know if the Laundries' malice against Gabby or if it was them seeking to protect their son, or a combination of both. This all comes down to a decision by Judge Danielle Brewer, who is now the presiding judge there in Sarasota County Circuit Court, and it'll be up to her as to whether or not this letter is admissible as evidence. Stephanie, hashtag KJB. If a mother wanted to give her son a loving letter as maybe a keepsake, why the burn comment? She claims it was an inside joke because they had all made jokes about this book, Burn After Writing. Poll time. Let's just do it. It's going to be only on YouTube Live. So join us on YouTube Live if you want to vote in this poll. Let's can I how many responses can I do here? Yes. No. I'd like to do more than 2 options, but I can't. At least it's not letting me. Do you believe Roberta Laundrie's explanation for the burn after reading letter? Yes? No. You don't have an opinion on the matter, don't vote. Unscientific social media YouTube Live poll. How many people we got on YouTube Live? About 4,000. Let's see what people have to say. We'll give that about 3 minutes. Look at some others' comments. Zaz, hashtag KJB, has Brian's sister ever spoken or made a statement apart from outside her house? Yes, to Good Morning America, I believe twice. People often forget about Cassie Laundrie, Brian's sister, who was there at the Fort DeSoto camping trip. Whether or not she would be called as a potential witness in the trial, that remains to be seen. I don't believe that she was on the initial witness list, or the very, very preliminary list that was put out sometime in the last year, many, many months ago. Chloe, I see your comment about I have to, let me make this clear. I have to be objective in my reporting. And so there's a fairness that comes into play here. If I just go along with all the other chatter online, if I just ride the wave of poo-poo on the Laundries, then that I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing right by you or audience. So I have to report it as it is. And people are asking, I think some people are in the comment section are surprised by how much I have spoken on this particular live stream in regards to Roberta Laundrie's frame of mind and the reasoning for her actions and her version of events, and why I've given that so much stock, if you will, is because I have to be fair and objective as a reporter. And if I read this and I just said, "Oh my God, who would believe this nonsense?" If I actually did that, what kind of journalist would I be? So, look, Chris and Roberta have not faced any charges. They have a right to remain silent. They have really, outside of that one statement or the statements that they put out through Bertolino, they have exercised that right to remain silent. They are, they have experienced tremendous loss as a result of losing their son, their future daughter-in-law, and until evidence comes out that points to anything to the contrary, we have to take this for. You have to evaluate this for what it is. It's Roberta speaking out for the first time. And while there is this potential conflict because she's claiming that this was a loving gesture, a loving letter, and one that was written, with a bit of a jovial, attitude in regards to the burn after reading component and the loving nature of the books and the stories that Brian and Roberta shared as children. While that's also true, we also have the conflict that Pat Riley is saying that it also contains. This only tells a portion of the story. I get it. Pat Riley is saying that this letter also contains references to a shovel and burying a body and getting Brian out of prison time, or getting Brian out of prison. But we don't have the letter yet. So we can't analyze that for what it is until we have that letter. We're going on the words of Pat Riley, who hasn't given us any reason to doubt his credibility. But this is the tangible document that we have now, Roberta's version of events. And until the actual letter comes out, if it does come out, this is that side of the story. You might not agree with it. But it's the side of the story that has been missing up until this point. You can poo-poo it on it all you want. But as a reporter, I have to report it for what it is. And it's the first time that this mother has provided any statement whatsoever from herself regarding her relationship with her son and what has transpired. Here in the Stream Center, reading your comments. YouTube. #HeyJB, where has Roberta's statement been made public? It's in the web story on WFLA.com. You can click on the link in the description of this video. The entirety of the letter is right there in my report, really at the bottom of the report. Karen is asking, will we get to see the letter? Oh, where'd it go? There's your comment, Karen. Will we get to see the letter eventually? All right, guys, wrong button. Will we get to see the letter eventually? That is up to Judge Brewer in the end. Now, look, let's say that Judge Brewer denies, or excuse me, no, hold on. Let me backtrack. Semantics, this is important. Let's say Judge Brewer grants the motion for a protective order, saying that this letter is private. There's nothing that can prove that it is anything tied to Guy Petito. And let's say that Judge Brewer removes it from the equation, takes it off the table, and it is not to be admitted as evidence in the case. Is there still a chance that the letter would come out in time? Yeah, because it was gathered by the FBI as part of evidence in a federal investigation. And we as journalists, and we as, really, it goes beyond journalists, it goes to just members of the public. We have something called Freedom of Information Act, where we can, as it's called, FOIA for for documents to be public and to be released from the government. And so I did that. I don't even remember when I did it. I'll have to look at my notes. I submitted a FOIA request. It's got my name on it with WFLA as the attached organization. And I submitted that FOIA request for these documents. And could it come out in that capacity? Sure. But as people who have reviewed FOIA deliveries in the past, the results of FOIA requests, you will know that not everything is made public. There's something called redactions. It's the big black bars that cover lines on the document. And so if the FBI determines it to be inconsequential to their investigation and it to be private correspondence between a mother and a son, they could, in theory, redact the letter from ever coming out publicly from their office. It would take somebody who is a FOIA expert to give us a take as to whether or not there's a likelihood that it would be redacted from public view on the FOIA request results. But if Judge Brewer denies the request or grants it, depending on how you look at it, there is still a chance the letter could come out eventually. But as reporters will shout from a rooftop, FOIAs don't come back in a timely fashion. FOIAs take forever. And so we don't know if those FOIA, somewhere within the federal government on a very long log of requests, it says JB Buno, WFLA, and it has the request for the documents that I've requested as far as the FOIA. And I don't know if I'm 600th in line, 6,000th in line, or 1,000,000th in line as far as the many FOIA requests, the hundreds, if not thousands, that get submitted with the government every single day. So when that could, there are FOIA requests that take a decade to come to fruition, to get a response. What I'm trying to tell you, the short version of it, is don't hold your breath. Kimberly, hashtag KJB, do you have any updates on the whereabouts of the Laundries? I have only ever heard that they have remained in Northport. Alicia, and this is exactly the type of social media commentary. I'm grateful for this question, or excuse me, this comment, because this speaks to the public perception of Roberta and Chris Laundrie. Alicia, I'll read your comment. Roberta's credibility is immediately thrown into question. She has frozen everyone out, appears to have been cold and frankly unlikable. Most people have no desire to believe her when she finally, I think that's where the comment cuts off, but yeah. Christina, thanks. Chocolate Factory, thanks. Some kind comments. I think that was from when I went on my spiel about remaining objective and remaining unbiased. And ooh, Gloria says, hashtag HJB, my sisters and I quote books and movies all the time, but we don't do it by handwritten letters. Yeah. I do too. I quote movies all the time. Me and my wife were always quoting movies, and I don't get the opportunity to read as much as I would like, but I have my favorites, books that are my favorites. Lakia or Lakia? Ryan here. Hashtag HJB. I don't believe the Laundries because of how inactive they were throughout the disappearance and the discovery. Why so silent if you're innocent? It's a big question. If you have nothing to hide, why not speak? It's a question that people have asked. Now, you have the right to remain silent. It's your constitutional right in this country. You have the freedom in this country to remain silent. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to come without consequence, because your silence, your selection, your choice to remain silent in the court of public opinion might speak volumes to people. And so in the court of public opinion, the Laundries have been thoroughly decimated. There are very few out there that say that will unequivocally support them. I think that there are a lot of people out there that do, that do sympathize with them. There are people that sympathize. I know that sounds crazy, but there are people that sympathize with the Laundries, given that they lost their son to suicide and their future daughter-in-law to murder, and this was just an absolute tragedy. But their refusal to pick up the phone and talk to Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt was unforgivable to a lot of people. Unforgivable to a lot of people. How you could not try to help those parents as they were doing those press conferences and pleading for people for information. They just wanted to find their daughter wherever she was. And the fact that the Laundries didn't just remain silent the entire time and didn't pick up the phone, didn't respond to that text, that to a lot of people is unforgivable. And I know because I read your comments. I care about what you have to say. Let's go to saying hi to Hellcat, Amy, Mama B on TikTok. Got some great folks on TikTok. Thanks for our audience on the other platforms. I filed a video report on TikTok and on Instagram today that is unique to the other reports that I have done. So you can find that there if you're looking for content. But we're about to wrap. This is a last call. We're going to go to each platform one last time: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok for just like one or two more questions each. This is a final call for your questions and comments. Linda says, #KJB, it is my opinion that the court of public opinion is based on nosiness unfulfilled. We don't need to know, but we are sure quick to blame. Sure. We had a story of late where, how about the raised hand emoji for people that remember a couple of weeks back when we had a missing child here in the Tampa Bay area by the name of JJ. And there was a lot of blame going around in our comment section. And the moment that he was found, there was a lot of chatter immediately in our comment section pointing to all the people that had assigned, in the estimations of many, undue blame on the parents after what had unfolded because the boy had been found alive. And there were so many people defending the parents because so many people, when we first broke the story, said, oh, it's the parents' fault, the parents' fault, the parents' fault, and the parents are to blame. And the blame game there on social media was playing out. It was a bit of a, it was ping pong back and forth over the course of about 24, 36 hours or so. So, if you guys remember that story, I see some hands. It's a reminder that the court of public opinion is brutal, just unmerciful, and quick. As Linda says, we are quick to blame. Yeah, social media is quick to blame. Immediately after a story breaks, people are blaming someone for something. It's just the nature of the world we live in. All right. One more from YouTube, and then we'll bounce around. Megan, #KJB. If she wrote it before they left, doesn't that mean she knew he was going to commit the crime? And if she wrote it after he got back, it means that she knew the crime after. Either way, she's wrong. We don't know what's in the letter, Megan. We have an idea through an attorney, but we don't have that document. We don't have the letter. We don't know exactly what it says. Look, Pat Riley claims that there is a mention of a shovel and burying a body and prison. But until we have the letter and we can read Roberta's words for what they are, we don't know how specific it is. It's not dated. We don't know if it could be taken out of context or misinterpreted. Until we have this letter, we can't, just exactly to what we were just talking about. You can't point the finger and say, oh, it doesn't matter if it was before or after. There's a, they knew he was going to commit the crime. You can't do that until we actually have it. That's exactly what we were just talking about as people, rush to formulate an opinion. Believe me, I understand given what we know, and it's human nature to do that. But until we have the letter, that's why, look, folks should really follow me on Twitter. If you're watching right now, you're clearly invested in this story. And you should follow me on Twitter, because it'll be on Twitter and Instagram too, where I will break news, or I will share the news of when the hearing is scheduled for this letter. Like, Judge Brewer will determine in that hearing whether the letter is to be made public or remain private. I'll share that out on Twitter. Karen with a great question that, oh my God, still coming in so fast, you guys. Hold on. Karen, who actually has the letter? It is in the possession of Mr. Bertolino. As of December, I have been told that it is to remain in the possession of Mr. Bertolino. And it's people are asking, could something happen to it? I have been told, no, it's just going to remain in the possession of Stephen Bertolino. All right, that's it for YouTube Live. TikTok. Brittany, you're very welcome. Carol, #KJB. Why wait 9 months to comment and then reference an infant book? Roberta claims that it was a difficult chapter in her relationship with her son, and that was something that her and her son shared as far as books and stories. That's her version of the events. Any more? I'll come back to TikTok. Give everybody a chance to just comment if they want to. Facebook. Trinity says, #KJB, when the letter was first spoken of, didn't Stephen Bertolino say in a statement that it was in reference to a movie? Let me go back to my chat with Bertolino. Let's see here. Does he mention give me a second here, folks. Yeah, all right. I'm going to have to scroll up in this conversation. Bear with me here, everybody. Everyone's got a phone and they know how this works. He says, the FBI gave it to me. I still have the letter. Don't get caught up in the hype. The letter in question was written prior to Brian and Gabby leaving Florida. Has nothing to do with the case. He accuses Riley of sensationalizing the tragedy. No, I don't have anything that I'm seeing here that he references the movie. A lot of texts. All right. Back to TikTok for a moment. Brenda, thank you. That's very kind. Mo, #KJB. How has this case changed your reporting and journalism? I'll just say this. It's a really interesting question from Mo on TikTok. I don't know if it's really changed the really good question. I don't think it's really changed how I go about a story, but I think that this story there's a lesson to be learned in this story, from a reporting standpoint, from a media standpoint, that and I've talked about this before, but it's so important in today's era of technology and social media to remember where you're getting your information from. It's so important for me and for you. There's been endless claims, fabrications, falsehoods, crackpot theories, you name it. And it is so easy to get to just be pointed in the wrong direction. And so I've just learned that it more than ever is it important to be thorough in your reporting, more than ever. I think that's what I'll say. That's a really good question, Mo. I haven't really thought about that. I think Facebook. Yeah, I think that's it for Facebook. And then Twitter. Oh yeah, one last time on Twitter. And then we'll head out. Yeah, Chico saying the same thing that Bertolino said it was in reference to a movie. I'm going to have to, and that might not have been from my reporting. It might have been from someone else's reporting, such as News Nation or so on and so forth. So I'll have to look more into that. But I'll have to look more into that. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me here. But really important, really quickly, before you head out, it's where this goes from here is so important because a May hearing has been scheduled in this case, the civil lawsuit between these two families. A hearing has been scheduled for May. However, that is not about the letter. That is about Stephen Bertolino and his attempts to dismiss him being added as a co-defendant on the lawsuit. That's scheduled for May. When this letter is the subject of a pretrial hearing remains to be seen. What I will do is tweet it out as soon as I know, because that hearing is going to be particularly important. Judge Brewer will likely determine in that hearing as to whether or not to rule in favor of the plaintiffs or the defendants in the case, and whether, and we'll learn once and for all, will the burn after reading letter become public. So Twitter and Instagram are where, and Facebook, really, and Facebook too. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are where I usually share out like alerts like that, advisories like that, that kind of an update. And then on Instagram and TikTok, I'm doing more video content over there. I really encourage you to find me over there on those platforms. And I'm trying to do more content on those platforms because some people just exclusively get their news on Instagram and TikTok. And so I want to make sure that that the reporting that we do here at WFLA Now is accessible to people on those platforms as well. I really appreciate folks who have been hanging out with us here on stream, using hashtag KJB and interacting with us. Again, this is our venture into interactive journalism. There are now new ways, if you're just joining us for the first time this week or in the last week, there is now a new way for you to provide feedback for the streaming that we do. If you're looking to contact me directly, always feel free to DM me on social media, especially on Instagram. I know that sounds crazy, but Instagram has the most user-friendly, for me, the most user-friendly ability to chat with people. Messenger too, Facebook Messenger, but really I try to interact with people on Instagram as much as I can. And then you can also use this new email address that was just set up last week by our great team here at WFLA. If you're trying to get a hold of me directly, just me, send an email to heyjb@wfla.com. It's pretty easy to remember, right? Our moderators, you guys can put out a reminder for feedback, or if you're trying to get a hold of me directly, you can DM me on Instagram or Facebook. But also, if email is your preferred method, heyjb@wfla.com. If you want to provide feedback for the work that I am doing and go above me and go to the powers that be, if you will, at WFLA, if you want to make story suggestions, if you want to provide feedback at a level for us to make changes here to how we go about live streaming at WFLA with the bosses, if you will, that's an email. It's a different email. You send an email to WFLAnow@WFLA.com. And that way, if you have a story suggestion, if you want to critique what we do here and how I do as far as live streaming, and you want to get to above me, so to speak, at WFLA, send it to WFLAnow@WFLA.com. My latest report, it's on WFLA.com. Brian Laundrie's mother breaks her silence. Roberta Laundrie breaking her silence for the very first time. I will be sharing updates on this story as they become available across all of my social media platforms. You can follow me at WFLAJB across, one more time, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, updates as they come in on these platforms, the latest on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.